Me now from Beijing is Gong. He's an economics professor at the University of International Business and Economics. And John, you saw here in the United States where the U.S. president was saying, we got to get back to business by Easter. Then later he said that was aspirational. Now there's some question when the economy will ramp back up here in the U.S. We're seeing that elsewhere in the world. And China is just such a global player. Talk to us about the impact that's going to have on the economy for China with, globalization such a big part and the rest of the world basically shut down in many respects.
Well, I think in many ways, the United States and other countries around the world are pretty much going to follow the path that China has gone through. It took us about 2 months to weather through this. Now we're gradually coming back. The new infection numbers are mostly in the single-digit numbers, or even none for a couple of days. Other than those imported cases we discovered at airports. So I think for the world, most part of the industrialized economies, it's going to take a while. I think it's going to take another 2 months before things can come back to normal. So in this context, China's exports are definitely going to be hit. We have 18% of our GDP related to exports, and I think it's going to be a very significant hit to that sector. So I think for these businesses, it's going to be pretty difficult time, and some of them are going to turn to the domestic market. Some of them are probably just not going to survive. So it's just the nature of the this pandemic.
Yeah.
I think what's important is that China right now is leading the world to recover. And China needs to be in a business. We need to provide things that the world desperately needs. So I think being still the bastion of manufacturing factory of the world is extremely important to keep the global production next still working, still functioning. So I think this is absolutely very critical.
John, we've been showing stories recently of some of these restaurants reopening. They've employed social distancing, other steps to make sure that there's no flare-up of the virus. How long a process are we looking at before we see a return to normal, or are we in for a new normal?
Well, I think I'm more inclined to a second opinion. I think we are in for a very extended time of this kind of business like this for some time. I think the Spanish flu provides a very good example of what we might have to experience in the next few months. The 1918, 1919 Spanish flu experienced 3 waves over a span of a year and a half. So, I hopefully this is not going to happen to us. But I increasingly view this following this path that this virus may get to the southern hemisphere and then come back again next winter. So it's going to be some time, I guess. So I think I'm more inclined to believing in your second opinion that this is going to be the new normal, especially for the service industry.
And if you look at that time period, because I think it is good to look back at history, you see how certain communities, flatten the curve, much like China did, holding it down, but others did not. All of that playing into this around the world as well. What are we going to see globally? I mean, obviously we're going to have a recession. Just how bad is it going to be, do you think?
I think it's going to be pretty bad. I mean, our experience here in China for the GDP in February experienced, somewhere like a 10% drop. But typically, the drop and the recovery path is more like a Z-shaped, horizontal Z-shaped curve, with a following up, a tapering off over time. It's going to be some time. But the good news is that overall, if you look back in history, overall, it's actually a boost to the U.S. economy, from the Spanish flu experience. In the 1920s, there's an empirical study that demonstrates the 1920s economic boom in the United States is somewhat attributed to this natural disaster. This indeed is a natural disaster. It's an outside shock to the system. But overall, looking back, it's actually, I put it quite sinisterly, natural disaster sometimes can be a blessing, actually, from an economic perspective. Of course, it causes carnage, it destroys properties, it kills people. This is very bad. But actually, from an economic perspective, in the long run, what we're going to see after this natural disaster is going to be economic boom. I'm pretty sure this is going to happen.
Well, we can't wait to get to that other side. Gong, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.